Thank you. So let's see if we've got the slide deck coming up. So I hope everyone's having a good morning today. Great speech from Rory. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the cloud divide. We've done some great market research with our financial customers since March and really found out where they're storing their data today and has it changed their perception based on the current geopolitical climate on where they should store their data tomorrow. So let's kick off. Quick round of hands in the room. How many people are storing their compliance data in a cloud of some sort? Give me a raise of hands. As expected, maybe 60%. So a bit of a divide in the room, and that is going to be a bit of a common theme as we go through the deck today. So I'm sure we've all seen these articles coming out of the newspapers, especially on sort of Euronews. For example, we see in the Netherlands, it's US big tech is being seen as a threat. We have Amazon, Azure, Google all launching government public clouds to try and overcome some of these threats. We have a on-prem movement, as it might be called, on sort of social media, or cloud reparation, which is the move back to on-premises, with 83% of CIOs surveyed in this case saying they're thinking about going back on-prem. And even AWS coming out and saying, you know, cloud reparation or back to on-prem could be on the cards here. So to top that one off, we also have an advisor to the Dutch Electoral Council saying it's no longer for us to save our data in the US public clouds. So do we need to rethink our strategies? So a little bit of an intro. Already had a mini intro, so I'll keep it short. So I'm Joshua Woods. I work in compliance engineering at Luware, 10 years experience in UC platforms, and about 7 to 8 years in real-time communications compliance. So we're talking about Skype for Business, Microsoft Teams, and trade floors. In our platform, we have over 250 customers, and we're capturing and archiving about 3 million records every month, and we're using a public cloud to be transparent. So to give you some background, I'm sure this is not a surprise for most of you, we see that the majority of companies, 96%, are using public clouds of some sort. There was a good range in here as well. Now, these public cloud providers, there are the big three, which we're all aware of, Azure, AWS, and Google. But interestingly on this slide, we have 84% of companies saying they're also using a private cloud. Now, we talked about those geopolitical shifts that we started to see sort of around February, March this year. We have some market research pulled from the Global Cybersecurity Outlook. And actually, in this one, we see that there's a large segment that are considering, 59% of companies are actually have been influenced by the recent geopolitical shifts. Now, on the flip side, what's the EU doing about these geopolitical changes? So we have various new initiatives. We have the Invest EU program, pushing money into new technologies, in particular around the cloud. We have the new AI innovation package. So if you're a small SME within Europe, there's some funding there for you to go and grab and build out your AI company. And we also have the Next Generation Internet Fund, which is really all-encompassing IoT and bringing some of these technologies back into Europe. So we do see some initiatives there that are pushing us back to the EU. So we decided to do some LinkedIn research. As I mentioned earlier, a little bit of bias there. We are in Azure, so public cloud. So we would have expected to see public cloud stays dominant from our followers. We'd expected to see more than 34%, I think, there. What's interesting on here, 21% think on-prem's back on the table. Really interesting. But then we went a little bit further. So we do have a range of financial and insurance-based customers on our compliance platform, over 250 of them at the moment, and we decided to do an anonymous survey to find out where they're storing their data today, has the recent changes resulted in them changing their strategy, and where are they going to store it tomorrow. So to show you who our customers are, full transparency, the ones that responded to the survey are mainly in Europe. We also have a number of companies within Germany, Switzerland's where we're from, and the UK, usually with branch offices based out of APAC and the Americas. So let's dig a little bit deeper. First question, where are you storing your data today? So the graph that you can see on the slide is a multiple answer choice, and this is something you'll see throughout the theme of the data we have today. Most of the companies are using a range of what's available to them. Now, the majority are using the combination, so hybrid, private, could be an EU cloud, could be on-prem, could be US clouds, but 46% of our customers aren't actually using any US public clouds at all. None in Azure, they're not storing the data there, and there is a real preference among our customers, especially in Europe and Switzerland, to be using on-prem or private cloud technology within region. So next, we asked them if they're going to perform any data migrations. Maybe they're already doing one, or perhaps they're planning to do one. And the few that are currently in a migration pathway are actually moving to private or European clouds. And the companies who aren't migrating at all are the ones that are using on-prem and hybrid solutions. So some interesting insights. Of course, the main priority is to balance the cost efficiency, security, and compliance for those clouds. But next, and I think this is the real interesting question, has their perception of the risk, I'm sure many of you in this room have had this conversation in your roles, has the risk perception changed since April? And what we find for some of our customers, a significant portion of those using the public clouds had a moderate increase to the risk and are reassessing their current cloud strategy. Meanwhile, the companies that are using the on-prem or the private clouds, none of them are reassessing their strategy. They're confident that they're doing the right thing already. So it shows that perhaps our cloud strategies that we put in place a little bit earlier in the decade could be under some strain. But that's our market survey. There's a ton of market research being done by a whole number of vendors that's available for everyone. So Gartner says 90% of cloud usage will be hybrid. Rackspace obviously says cloud usage is growing. Of course, we all know that. And 22% growth is in the hybrid space, so this is when there's a mix. And then, really interestingly, we have a report from the State of Cloud report, which is suggesting 69% of organizations are actually now considering private cloud or on-prem solutions. So some very interesting data coming out from a range of sources telling us that we do need to reassess this risk and really have a look at it. So what sorts of things should we be doing when we are assessing the risk? And I'm sure most of you in this room are probably better at risk assessment than I am. But I wanted to give you some insights from the customers or potential customers that are talking to Luware and what sort of questions are really dropped in as really important in the last sort of 12 months. So number one, if you're going to a SaaS-hosted solution in a public US cloud, you should expect at a minimum for them to have a SOC 2 Type 2 report. This is externally audited by PwC or KPMG or by another auditor. They come in, you have a set of controls, and you can map these controls to your internal controls in your business and really start to dig into what that company is doing and what they say they're doing. And on top of that, we even have some customers come to us and say, we actually want to audit ourselves as well. So there are options there to still move to the cloud by assessing those risks in detail. Data protection, of course, if a SaaS provider is using a public US cloud or even a private cloud hosted by someone else, there should be protections in place from the hosting provider, protecting the data layer of the SaaS provider that you're purchasing from, and there should be protections in place from the SaaS provider from accessing your data, such as, for those that are in Azure, there's Azure Lockbox, which protects your data from Microsoft. They can't get in. Data access controls, of course, are important, and that's sort of covered by Lockbox. Data residency, this is a fairly easy one. If you're purchasing a SaaS solution for compliance archiving, it should be in the region where your regulations state it should be. You need to find out where the cross-border data flows are traveling. If they say maybe their web application could be hosted in Europe, but then they have data storage in another outside region, or maybe it's being operated from the US, what are your cross-border data flows? Who's accessing that data? You're within your rights to ask those questions and find out if they're meeting your requirements. Switzerland's a great one for us because we have the Secrecy Act, which prevents any of the data leaving Switzerland at any point. So it's a really interesting one. And of course, this is the big one, which really is coming up time and time again this year since the recent changes in the geopolitical structure. Access to your data is critical. At any point, you should be able to get your data out in a format that's readable. You can reuse it. You can put it in an archive, a different archive or a different solution, and it's ready, available for you to move forward. Perhaps that company goes insolvent because of a new tariff. What do you do with your data? Who's going to pay for that? You need to have methods to protect that data while it's in this SaaS environment, and perhaps you just export it out and have a copy yourself where you can manage that. So these are some really easy things that you can ask and you can check when using a SaaS cloud provider. So we're coming to the end. It is a short talk. Let's have a quick look at the conclusion. So I think most people know it already. There is a big cloud divide. There's lots of options out there. You have public clouds, you have a hybrid where you're using a mixture of on-prem, public clouds, private clouds, European clouds. There's a massive divide. And the key things we should be looking at and thinking about are, where your data is and who has access to it and how you access that is really important. These are the number one topics people come to us and ask about today. The back to on-prem movement that we do see actually quite a lot on social media at the moment, this back to on-prem data reparations, some of the news articles we talked about, it's there, but we don't think people are really moving in on it. So it's a thought, but it's not really moving forward yet. We need to keep an eye on that. Multi-cloud or hybrid cloud is where everyone is today. We can see that from our customers. I'm sure most of you in this room will have various different cloud solutions that will fit your requirements. And the key is flexibility and the new features and functions. So last but not least, it really comes down to a case-by-case basis on the risk. You need to analyze that risk, look at those risk factors. I gave you a short preview of some of the things people are asking us, and you can determine what's right for your business. So that comes to the end, and I'd love to give you the chance to ask a question right in front of me. Yep.
Thank you, that was really good. So in 2013, Edward Snowden leaked the PRISM program, which was all about the NSA collecting data for the Five Eyes, in particular GCHQ. So we've known America has been looking at the cloud for a long time, and it's never been, it's been open to the secret services to look at for a very long time. Why do you think in the last few months people are reassessing rather than having never gone there in the first place?
Reassessing on why they're in the public clouds?
Yes, exactly. Why are they now doing it now? Is it the Trump effect, or was it?
Well, my personal opinion is, in Trump's previous term, he enabled the Cloud Act, and the Cloud Act said he could subpoena any US public company to access their data from any machine anywhere in the world. Now, obviously, he left. He wasn't in government anymore. And I think there's maybe more trust from the Europeans when it's in a different geopolitical state, but it's back. And now we're starting to see different movements in the US, which maybe we perceive as a threat. And I think that's why we're back to where we are today in terms of the risk. I think in terms of PRISM and what Edward Snowden leaks, I mean, that's from the network layer. It doesn't matter where you put it. It doesn't matter where they were splicing it from the fiber with the internet service providers. So you just need to encrypt in transit, and then that should prevent them from accessing the data as it bypasses over the ISPs. That's all you can do, right? And that's where communication platforms like WhatsApp and Signal appear from. If you don't have the certificates on the end-to-end, you can splice the fiber and copy the light signals, but you can't actually get the data out unless you have a quantum computer, which comes to the next problem. And there are already quantum encryption technologies that are being implemented as standards. I think the European Union was looking at recently, and that should protect against that. So hopefully that gave you some insight.
Thank you.
Good question. Difficult question. Yeah, please. Sure.
Thank you, Joshua. Hamid from Grip Magazine. I wanted to know your thoughts on the interplay, the correlation between the evolution of technology, development of technology, and geopolitics. So geopolitical instability or change obviously leads to new innovation. Developers constantly need to adapt and come up with bespoke software development just to tick a box and be on the right side of regulation. But does geopolitical instability also somehow disrupts a more long-term, stable development of technology rather than having to find short-term solutions for short-term political policies? It's more of a... I hope you go forward.
I understand what you mean, actually. I think Rory covered it a little bit this morning. We've been so used to having a set of rules, and maybe the rules change every few years, and your software and your archives changes during that period to meet those requirements. Take GDPR. You never deleted any of this data before, and now if it's not MiFID data, now you need to have selective capture of data. So these things get implemented over a period of 2 years. You have enough time to get these processes in place, these policies in place. With the changes that happen now, where rules might change quickly, we're going to be more reliant, in my opinion, on artificial intelligence to make changes, make improvements. We need to be more flexible. Having that traditional sense of communications compliance, which I think most people will have had in a bank or insurance, you would deploy it and you'd leave it for 10 years. You'd never touch it. It was just left there. That's changed now. You need to be ready to react, be flexible. You need software developers and environments that can adapt quickly. And I think that's sort of where that impact is going to have. And perhaps that will mean the flexibility on the SaaS environment, where we can turn it on, turn it off, select what we need. I think that's going to become more critical, actually. But perhaps in terms of archives, you're still going to want to take the data out there for reasons like this gentleman suggested. Okay, so I think we are out of time. Lovely. Thank you all very much for coming to my talk, and I hope you enjoyed it. Have a lovely day.